I don't think I'm a superwoman, so thank you for that. Yeah, so as Harry Bucket mentioned, tonight's topic is balancing spiritual and material life. I think that sounds kind of enticing, right? But I was thinking about it some more, and I'm actually going to talk about how it's not a balance. Are you guys surprised by that?
No.
Hopefully I have your attention now. So yeah, I was kind of like thinking about my life and gosh, the various things that I have going on. Harry Buckton mentioned right now, I'm in the retail management world, so you can imagine it's the busiest time of year. Amongst that, I'm also opening up a business on Tuesday actually with Jamuna. A lot of you guys know her. We're opening up a vegan nail shop. By the way, you guys are all invited to our grand opening party on December 28th. So just throwing that out there. But yeah, so there's a lot of like competing things going on, right? Between work, that, my spiritual life, my commitments to the community, my services, and my dedication to, you know, chanting every day and everything else. So it does start to become like a lot. And, you know, recently one of my teachers pointed out how it's actually not a balance, and it's about focusing on what's most important. You know, and I thought that was so deep and so important. And there's an example of, you know, there's this time management guru. Maybe you guys have heard of this example. But he goes to the front of the class and he has this glass jar. And then he fills it with rocks. And then he asks the audience, is this jar full? And everyone's like, yes, it's full. It has rocks. And then he pulls out pebbles. And he starts filling the jar with pebbles. And then he turns to the audience again. He asks, hey, is the jar full now? And everyone says, yes, yes it is. You know, and then he pulls out a bag of sand. And then he fills the jar with sand. You know, and then he asks the audience again, you know, is the jar full? Everyone's like, yes. And then he asks everyone, okay, like, what's the big lesson here? You know, some people kind of got a little twisted. They're like, oh, you could just jam-pack a ton of stuff into your life. You know, and so they're kind of like missing the point. And I could say for myself, that was actually me, where I was thinking like, gosh, the more I accomplish, the more fulfilling things will be. But that's actually not the case. And, you know, the important lesson to be learned in that example is that, you know, you start by filling the rocks first, the most important things, and that will make room for everything else. You know, and I was just kind of reflecting. I know I've shared with a few of you guys a little bit about my story. You know, like right after college, I started experiencing a lot of like material success, and I wasn't happy. I found myself depressed and with a lot of anxiety, and that kind of led me towards being materially exhausted, which then kind of pushed me towards asking the bigger questions in life, like who am I, what am I here for, like what's my purpose, like there has to be more to this world, you know, and then I kind of turned towards spirituality at that point. And I feel really fortunate to have done that, because, you know, had I not gone through all that material exhaustion, it wouldn't have pushed me towards the spiritual path that I'm in now. And I just remember constantly finding myself in a place where I felt like I was constantly getting swept up. It's kind of like I was like swimming in this ocean. This like wave would come and I'd just get like knocked down and like knocked down again. It's just like swimming and swimming. Do you guys ever experience that? Where you're just like getting knocked down and getting knocked out. And I'm not saying that I don't get knocked down now, but it doesn't happen as often. You know, and I start to think about like, what is it? Like, what has really shifted in my life recently over the past couple years? And it's been a focus on my spiritual path and like grounding myself into something. You know, and as I was going through my spiritual journey, I oftentimes heard from my teachers that it's important that you water the root of the tree. And I kept thinking like, okay, water the root of the tree. Maybe some of you guys have heard of that example. You can think like if you have a plant at home. I actually don't have a green thumb, so a lot of the plants that I have die. So maybe that's not a good example for me, but it's very telling. But yeah, if you think about like a tree or any plants, you don't go and water the leaves, right? You water the root, and that will help the plant or the tree flourish, right? And so we're actually kind of really similar to plants. you know, sometimes I'm like on Facebook, Instagram, and I see memes. Have you guys seen that meme? It's like, oh, I'm very much like a plant. I just need sunlight, love, and water, and I'll be good. So, yeah, in some ways we are similar to the plants, you know, where we just need to nourish ourselves deeply. And I think some of us don't even realize that we're malnourished in that aspect. We're like filling our lives up with so much sand, and we're wondering why we're so depressed or why we're in so much anxiety, but we like didn't make any room for the rocks and the things that are most important. So just as I'm thinking about this more, think like, okay, well, how is it that we can try to apply some of this to our life? And I'm thinking through like some of the basic principles that I've heard, and you guys have probably heard this from different speakers. You know, this idea that you're not the mind, you're not the body, you know, that you're a spiritual being. And it sounds like, maybe for some of you guys, it sounds like so basic, or gosh, you've heard it over and over again. But how many of us can actually say, yes, I'm fully realized, like, yes, I know I'm not the body. Can anyone say that? Like, yes, you fully realize. That's awesome.
I fully realize that. I just know that I'm not the body.
I'm like, good for you. That's amazing. You know, but like, I want us to do a bit of a thought experiment and think about, maybe some of you guys can share right now, how different do you think your personal life would be if you really acknowledge that? Like, if you really think about it deeply, take a few moments. Like, if you really acknowledge that you're not your body, that you're not like these material possessions. Like, you know, question A for you guys is, how different would your life be? And then question number 2 would be, how different do you think your environment would be? Like, how different would the world be if we acknowledge that? That's me opening it up to you guys. Does anybody want to share how different they think their personal life would be? Yeah.
Probably treat people a lot kinder, right? And like be less selfish, I think.
But why do you think that is, that you would be kinder if you realize that?
Because I would just see, like, I would see pure soul, like I wouldn't see their coverings. So I wouldn't have any cognitive biases or anything, you know, covering my judgments. So.
Yeah. Yes, ready to?
Say if I like crashed my car, or like somebody crashed into my car, I wouldn't have such a big like a pain to, even to like my own heart, because it would be like, oh, that's just one of my possessions, you know. It's like everything else. It's temporary. It's not really. It's not quite myself. Whereas people actually, they treat their car even as if it's their own body.
Yeah, right? They fully freak out if there's a scratch. They like lose their mind. Good example. Does anybody else want to share? Yeah.
Well, the body is limited. There's only so much you can do with the body. So if you weren't that body, you might be so much more than that. You might be consciousness expanding. To be like, I'm not just this tiny vessel.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point, because then you're like, wait a second, there's something bigger going on. Sometimes we like limit ourselves so much because you just think like, what is it that I can accomplish individually? And you know, I even apply this to like so many different environments where I'm in, where the project and task at hand is so big that there's no way I can possibly do it on my own. And sometimes it could be overwhelming when I find myself in those situations. But actually, I'm grateful when those situations happen, because it forces me to realize that I can't do it by myself. I'm like, there's no way this is going to get done if I try to muscle through it on my own. You know, there's situations where sometimes I've done that and I start to think like, okay, I could just muscle through anything. But then when those situations come where it's like so much bigger than you and you have to turn to other things, it's like, wow, there's something else going on. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a really nice point. Does anybody else want to share? Okay, how about question B? How different do you guys think the world would be if we acknowledge this? If people acknowledged it, you're not the body. Yeah.
I think we would fight fight less. It's kind of like a me world out there. So if it was non-material, for the spiritual part of of our lives was the most important, we wouldn't be fighting over things. We would be helping people out more.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. It seems like people would be more peaceful, right? Like less attached to things. And I think you raised your hand again, right, Chuck?
It's more like the first question. I just wanted to rephrase it from like car to I feel like loss in general would be easier to take if you're actually fully like not bodily conscious. If you're like completely transcendental to your body, I feel like loss on the material platform would be a lot less heavy.
Yeah, 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 definitely agree. Does it happen? Okay.
I think that there's a negative side to it.
Okay. What
The
is that?
negative side would be that, I'm going to live infinite lifetimes, so why does it matter? Why does it matter what I do in this lifetime, because I'm going to come back over and over again? So it almost like removes like
Mortality.
it removes the direness of life, which is I want to live my fullest life that I can. Why should I? Because I'm going to live 1,000 more lifetimes.
You know, but what if you can connect while you're here to something that's higher, that can give you that higher sense of purpose while you're here?
I think that's where suffering comes in, because then we suffer and then we don't like it, and then we realize, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And the human life is very rare. Like, you never know when you're gonna get this type of body again. Like, there's so many. You never know what you're gonna be next life. You could be like plant life, animal life, or even demigod life. You know, or hellish. You know, God forbid. But you know, it's like don't take this life for granted either way. You know, so this is like meant for spiritual life.
Yeah, definitely. So these are all really important things, and I think it's great that you guys have this community and are also on that path that continuously remind you. You know, and it's like, you know, going back to the example of like getting swept up by the current, it definitely still happens to me, and I think I've almost like, I'm a little paranoid of that, or like this fear of like getting swept up, and I think that in some ways that fear is actually good, because it reminds you, like, it's so easy to get swept up. Let me not do that. Let me do things that will ground me, things that will help me stay focused. And, you know, for me, that's been a meditation that I engage in every day. You guys were chanting earlier the Maha Mantra, and that's a meditation that I do every day. And for me, it started off as an experiment. I'm like, okay, let me just try this out. And it was 5 to 10 minutes a day. And I started to notice a difference, you know, each day. And, you know, there were days where it'd be like super distracted, like in the car, like Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And they're like watching TV or like laying down, you know. And then some days I'm like, you know, I'm going to be focused. I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and like it's going to be nice. And then I found that the days where I did that, I was like really focused. It was like the best day ever. Have you guys? I know some of you guys are experimenting with chanting, maybe, or different forms of meditation, so maybe you can relate. And then, you know, the experiment just continued on, and, you know, I kept reminding myself, like, okay, just water the root of the tree, water the root of the tree. And, you know, as I started taking on more responsibility and more things were coming on my plate, just kept reminding myself, like, I think it could be really easy to gain more responsibility and think, you know what, I don't have time to chant and do my meditation anymore. Like, I'm working 12-hour shifts, so I can't do it, you know. But then we fail to realize, well, by doing that first, that's going to nourish you and help you work through all the other things. And, you know, one of my teachers one time said that it's like putting on your spiritual armor. So we're kind of like in this like war zone. You know, and being in retail, it's literally a war zone. Like, literally people are screaming, and you can't, like, take 2 steps without 5 people approaching you. I mean, you guys go holiday shopping, right, I'm sure? So, yeah, it's like there's stuff all over the ground. It's just, like, complete chaos. So I remember, like, being in my car, literally, like, putting on war paint, like, okay, and, like, looking at myself in the mirror, like, okay, you can do this. Like, you know, it's like it gets that intense, so... but I'm actually, again, grateful that I sometimes get put into those environments, because it forces me to ground myself. Like, how am I going to get into that war zone if I'm all over the place? Like, I have to ground myself. So again, it was like a practice, like an experiment. Well, what if I tried this? What if I switch things up and focus on this first and then see how the rest of my day plans out? And again, then I started finding like, hey, there's actually something to it. And you know, I'm not saying I have it all figured out, but it's definitely like I've noticed a difference from night and day, and it's like suddenly there's like space opening up. Like I never thought I could do those things and like open my own business. I thought it was one or the other. You can't do both, you know. And it's like somehow it's like all working itself out. But by maintaining that focus, you know, I'm like focusing on higher principles, surrounding myself by people same lifestyle that are also inspiring me, so that when I see those waves coming, like I'm like surrounded by people that are reminding me, hey, go deep, and the wave won't hit you. You know, and it's not just me doing it. It's like, hey, like I have guides around me and like people inspire me, like, hey, go deep, don't get swept up by the current again. And I'm so grateful that I have that in my life. And you know, I think that a lot of you guys can leverage each other to do the same. Another point that I wanted to bring up was just like I wanted to also keep tonight's talk real, and not just be like, hey, you just have to practice spirituality and, you know, have some kind of practice. Like, you know, there's still the material life, and I'm sure a lot of us still want to enjoy. I definitely still want to enjoy. Like, I still put on makeup, do my hair, like buy stuff, go to the store, go shopping, whatever, you know, throw parties. But you know, I just start to think that, does that actually define me? And like, how consumed do I get by that? And so I was thinking about this more, and then I was thinking about the fact that I have this sweet tooth. I don't know how many of you guys can relate to that. So I have this sweet tooth, and I find that sometimes I like overindulge. So I'm like, oh, I'll just have a piece of chocolate, and then like have like a whole bag all of a sudden, and then I feel like crap. It's just like too much, and I'm like, and then it's like overly stimulating, and it's just like a lot, and you know, then you start to experience side effects, right? Like later on you end up gaining weight, or you start like breaking out or whatever, right? And it's like not good. So what I have to do is periodically I'll do like some kind of fast, you know, just like, okay, no more processed sugars. And then I find that in the beginning it's so hard. I'm like thinking about it, I'm like, I just want a piece of chocolate or cookie or cupcake, that cake. And, you know, we come to these events and there's always a sweet. It's like that sweet's there like torturing you. That's what it is for me. I'm like, God, I'm trying not to have it. But I find that when I do the fast, like I'm thinking about it, but then after a few days it starts to become easier, and then over time it becomes easier, and then I'm not even thinking about it as much, and then I'm actually able to listen to what my body needs, and then I'm able to like eat a little more properly, so I can actually have like the right servings of fruits and veggies. And then I find that actually I was craving those sweets because I wasn't properly nourishing myself. And I think that spiritual life is actually very, or like in our material lives, it's actually very similar, where we're digging in and we want that sweet, and we're like, oh, I'll have a bite of the cookie, and sometimes we like overindulge and have too much, and then we kind of feel like crap afterwards. So we have to be mindful of those things. But you know, going back to that same example, when you're actually nourished and you're eating properly, you're not craving as much of those sweets. You're satisfied. So we can start to do the same for ourselves by focusing on those higher principles. And, you know, like Mother Teresa famously said that, you know, the world is suffering from hunger, but it's not hunger of the stomach. It's the hunger of the soul. And, you know, I think a lot of people aren't even in a place where they could realize that they're malnourished in the soul. They're just like, you know, playing with sand all day and then wondering why they're have so much sickness and why they're so miserable, but they're not like focusing on those higher things. And so I think a lot of you guys are here because you're probably asking those bigger questions, and you probably get a really like a nice feeling. Maybe you come out of here, you're like, hey, I kind of feel uplifted, and I'm not quite sure why, but this feels good, and everyone's so nice, and like, what's going on? Yeah, like there's really something to this. It's like really quite special. So I hope that you guys really take advantage of what you have here, because it's really easy to come out of here on Thursdays and just get like swept back up. So then you know, when you come out of here, what is it that you're going to do to sustain yourself, to keep yourself nourished? Are you just going to go back and binge again on those sweets and like feel like crap and wait to get nourishment here, you know? So it's like, it's great that you're coming here once a week, and maybe that's where you're at, and you're like, you know what, this is my commitment, I'm coming on Thursdays and I'm getting nourished that way, you know? And then maybe you've been coming along, you're like, gosh, like I kind of need nourishment a little more, and then you start like showing up to other things, right? And I see a lot of faces here where, you know, maybe you guys are like going to other programs, or I see you guys like hanging out and kind of digging in a little bit more. Yeah, but there is really something to this, and it's quite magical. And I think when you start connecting to those higher things, you start to realize that it's not you. So it's like, it's really easy to fall into illusion and think like, oh, I'm doing all these great things. It's like me, but it's actually like, no, it's not about you. The world doesn't revolve around you, and there's something bigger at stake here. So if we learn to nourish ourselves from within, it could be really, really powerful in our lives. So that's like my talk for today. It's not about balance, but it's about nourishing yourself from within and focusing on the bigger things in life. Thank you, guys. I don't know if we have time for questions, or if you want to go straight to Kirtan. Okay. I don't know, questions, comments, or we can go straight to Kirtan. Maybe if you guys want to share something where you're at, something that resonated with you. Yeah.
I like how you talked about the sweets, because that was like something I'm dealing with, that I've focused on. Like, I haven't had like added sugars now for 2 weeks. I'm pretty proud of myself, but I've noticed how much more energy I have to work out in the morning, and even at work, when I have work at like 6 in the morning, I'm just like, fruit gives you so much energy. So I like that you said that, because it like motivated me even more.
Yeah, I'm getting motivated. I was like, no more sweets. Yeah, and it's like amazing how much more energy and how much better you feel, and then you get so much more done, right, in your day.
You feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very similar. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
When you enjoy in material work, how do you explain for yourself in compare in a spiritual enjoyment in a spiritual world? Because you told sometimes you enjoy material work. So how, if you think that only you should enjoy in a spiritual world, how do you explain that part? How you can accept that part, enjoying in material world?
I think it's more of acknowledging, like, for me, for example, where I'm at. I'm not going to, like, pretend I'm, like, super renounced and I'm, like, I don't care for those things, but I find that over time, I start to lose taste in some of those material things, and it starts to become less and less important. And if that's happened in such a short period of time, for me, I can only imagine what will happen years from now, and how much more of a taste I'll get for spirituality or higher things, and how much more fulfilling that will be. I think sometimes when we come to spirituality, it's like, it's really attractive to just like give everything up and pretend like we don't want those things when actually we do. So I think it's like important to acknowledge where you're at. And I think that was the case for me when I first came around. I'm like, I'm just going to give all of this up. I'm going to quit my job, no more of this. And that's actually not where I was. So had I done that, I think things would have been a lot more difficult. Eased into it, and it's like acknowledge that it's a process, and it's not just going to happen overnight, and that, you know, acquiring that taste is going to take time. But it's definitely happening, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it.